Your last real day of work at full effort might already be behind you, and your manager has no idea. Somewhere between £45,000 and £85,000. That is roughly what an average worker in their early 60s still has coming to them in salary and pension contributions between now and the day their state pension actually starts. Not savings you have to go and find. Money already built into your job, still owed to you every single month you stay employed. There's a catch nobody mentions when they hand out that advice. If you take the generic route, the bare minimum trick you see repeated online, you are not quietly retiring. You are walking straight into a performance improvement plan, and in the United Kingdom, a performance improvement plan can end with you dismissed for poor performance and paid nothing in redundancy. 0. The exact money you were trying to protect disappears. There is a better way to do this, and it comes from the law itself rather than a productivity trick. Employment law here gives you a genuine shield if you understand how to use it properly. Used correctly, it protects your pay while you wind down, it protects your £268,275 tax-free lump sum allowance for when you finally do retire, and it lets you check out mentally without your employer ever having grounds to push you out early. I've watched people try this the wrong way and lose everything they were trying to protect. Today I want to walk you through what I call the invisible exit, the version of this that actually holds up. If you are over 55, finished chasing promotions you do not want anymore, but you still need those employer pension contributions landing every month, stay with me. This channel exists for exactly that stage of working life. In the United Kingdom, quiet quitting is legally dangerous in a way most people never think about. Employment law lets your employer dismiss you for capability, which is a formal word for underperformance. If your output drops below what your job description promises, your employer can put you on a performance improvement plan, and a performance improvement plan is usually the first documented step toward dismissal. But there's a version of this that keeps you protected. I call it minimum viable performance. You keep meeting 100% of your core contractual duties, the things actually written in your job description, while quietly dropping the extra effort nobody is paying you for. Do that, and your employer has no legal grounds for a capability dismissal, because you are still doing the job you were hired to do. There's an important difference here between capability and conduct, and it decides which side of this you land on. Conduct means you have simply stopped showing up properly, missed deadlines with no explanation, gone silent on your team. That gets you dismissed fast, and it can happen without much of a process at all. Capability means you are still present and still delivering your core role, just without the extra hours you used to give away for free. That difference is not obvious from the outside, which is exactly why it needs spelling out. You are not being lazy when you do this properly. You are running a fairly strict audit of your own contract and protecting your health along the way. Most people quiet quitting badly fall into a different trap entirely. When they pull back, they disappear. They stop speaking up in meetings, stop being visible on projects, and that is exactly the wrong move if your company ever runs a redundancy consultation, which happens constantly to workers over 50. Invisibility does not protect you during a headcount review. It makes you an easy name to circle on a list. Let's put a number on what is actually at stake. Say you are 60 years old, on a salary of £50,000 with 20 years at the same employer. Made redundant properly, your statutory redundancy pay sits close to the legal maximum of £22,530 on top of your notice pay. Get dismissed instead for a capability failure during a performance improvement plan, and that £22,530 does not exist. You walk away with nothing but your notice period. This is the trade-off nobody spells out when they hand you generic quiet quitting advice from social media. Doing less without a plan does not protect you. It just moves the risk from being tired at work to being unemployed with no cushion, right at the exact age when a new job is hardest to find. So how do you actually cut your hours in half without tripping the capability wire? It starts with a document most HR departments hope you never think to create. This is the actual system behind it, not just a mindset shift. I call it the Contractual Firewall, and it works by mapping everything you actually do in a working week against the written job description you were originally hired against. Start with the audit. Most people in their late 50s and early 60s are doing far more than their contract asks. Go through your last month of work honestly, and you will usually find that 30 to 40% of your time goes to tasks that were never in your original job description. Extra meetings you were pulled into, or reports nobody else wanted to own. None of that is contractual. All of it is optional, once you know where the line actually sits. Ask yourself honestly how much of your current week would survive if someone else had to approve every task against your contract. For most people, the answer is uncomfortable. That discomfort is useful because it tells you exactly where the firewall needs to go up. I've had to do this myself, back when 60-hour weeks started wrecking my sleep. Once your audit is done, you have grounds to ask for what is sometimes called a focus review, a formal conversation with your manager about protecting your core duties as your capacity changes. You do not need a diagnosis to have this conversation. You need a clear account of what your contract actually says, and a reasonable case for protecting it. Then there is the one document that changes everything. I call it the performance log, and it is simply a running record, kept for yourself, of exactly how you are meeting each requirement in your job description, week by week. Most people going through this hide. You do the opposite. You document. When you can show in writing that you are meeting every core duty on your contract, a performance improvement plan has almost nothing to attach itself to. That is what makes this approach different from simply doing less and hoping nobody notices. I used to believe that staying late every night showed loyalty. I was wrong about that. During the layoff rounds of 2024 and 2025, I watched 30-year veterans who never left the office on time get the exact same envelope as brand new starters. Loyalty measured in unpaid hours was never actually being tracked by anyone who mattered. None of this is free, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. Building a performance log takes a genuine hour or two each week that you did not have to spend before. But weigh that against the alternative, a performance improvement plan built on nothing but someone else's impression of you, and the maths tips firmly in favor of doing the paperwork. It sounds unglamorous, because it is, but unglamorous is exactly what keeps you employed on your own terms. This is where the real time comes back. Most of that 30 to 40% of extra scope is repetitive, admin-heavy work, meeting notes, routine reports, status emails, the same in structure every time. When you batch that kind of task properly and stop rebuilding it from scratch each week, a genuine 40-hour week of scope creep can shrink to something closer to 15 hours of real, focused effort. On a salary of £60,000, that shift alone moves your effective hourly rate from roughly £31 an hour up toward £83 an hour for the exact same pay packet. That is the legal shield and the practical system in place. But there's a wall most people hit right after this, and it has nothing to do with HR. It's the guilt. If some part of you feels like doing less at work is basically stealing from your employer, you are not imagining that feeling, and you are not unusual for having it. For a lot of people your age, being reliable was never just a description. It became an identity. You were the one who got things done, the one people called when something needed fixing at 6 in the evening. Stepping back from that does not just change your workload. It can feel like losing a part of who you are at work. That feeling is not a character flaw. It is simply what happens when decades of being useful get compressed into a single job title. Recognizing that is not an excuse to disappear. It is the starting point for setting a fair limit instead of an unlimited one. There's a way to think about it that actually holds up. The company you work for is a legal structure, not a person capable of feeling loyalty or betrayal back. Your contract is a trade, a set number of hours and a defined output in exchange for a set amount of pay. If you deliver the hours and the output your contract describes, the trade is complete and fair, whether or not you also deliver the extra effort nobody agreed to pay for. This idea is not new. The Roman emperor and philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote about judging situations for what they objectively are, rather than the emotional weight we attach to them. Applied here, it means separating the actual terms of your employment from the story your own conscience tells you about loyalty. There is a practical version of this you can use in the room, not just in your head. When someone tries to hand you a new project on top of your existing load, you do not need to argue or explain yourself. You can simply say, "I am currently at capacity with my core duties, so which of them should I deprioritize to make room for this?" That single sentence puts the decision back where it belongs, with the person asking for more, not with you. Once the guilt loosens its grip, something else becomes possible. You stop spending your energy managing how you feel about doing less, and you can actually focus on the money question underneath all of this, the one that decides whether coasting even makes financial sense before you reach state pension age. Think back to 2008. Anyone who retired early that year without some kind of bridge to fall back on watched their pension pot get hit right as they started drawing from it, and there was no time left to recover before the money ran out. Move forward to the inflation spike of 2023 and 2024, and you saw a quieter version of the same problem: retirement pots losing real spending power just as people needed them most. Quiet quitting, done properly, is really just a form of insurance against that exact timing risk. You keep the paycheck landing while you wait for calmer ground. The timing matters right now for a specific reason. The state pension age has started rising from 66 to 67, phased in from the 6th of April, 2026, through to 2028. If you are 64 today, that change alone can leave you with a gap of 2 to 3 years between the day you would like to stop and the day your state pension actually begins paying out. It is worth sitting with that gap for a moment instead of rushing past it. 2 or 3 years does not sound like much written down, but it is the exact stretch of time that decides whether your retirement starts from a position of strength or a position of catching up. That gap is not abstract either. It is the difference between covering your mortgage and your council tax from a paycheck that is still arriving each month, or covering those same bills by drawing down a pension pot that now has to last considerably longer than you originally planned for. That gap is exactly where the trade-off sits. Quit today, and you likely have to start drawing from your SIP earlier than planned, which shrinks the pot doing the compounding for you. Stay employed in a reduced, coasting capacity instead, and you keep your £60,000 pension annual allowance active, along with any employer contributions still landing every month. Run the numbers on 2 years of coasting at a £50,000 salary with a 10% employer match. That adds roughly £10,000 to your pension pot over those 2 years, money you would not have received if you had already left. At the same time, it keeps you from needing to withdraw an estimated £60,000 from your own private savings to cover that gap. Add those together, and coasting for 2 years is worth something close to a £70,000 swing in your favour, compared with quitting outright today. That is the plan working the way it should. But plans meet reality, and the real test of the invisible exit is what happens if your employer announces a restructuring while you are in the middle of it. Picture the announcement most people your age dread: restructuring, a consultation period, a list being drawn up somewhere in HR that nobody on your team has seen yet. The person who quit badly is in real trouble here. They stopped speaking up, let their visible output slide without any record of what they were still delivering, and their last 2 reviews used words like underperforming. When the redundancy list gets built, weak recent reviews make you an obvious, low-resistance choice, and you get offered nothing beyond the bare legal minimum because there is no paper trail proving otherwise. The person running the invisible exit properly is having a completely different conversation. Their performance log shows, month by month, that every core duty on their contract was met throughout. There is no capability case to build against them. That gives them real leverage to negotiate a settlement agreement instead of simply accepting whatever redundancy terms are offered first. Ask yourself which version of that story you would rather be living when the letter finally lands in your inbox. The difference between the two is not luck. It comes down to which of them can prove, in writing, that they held up their end of the contract the whole way through. This is the number that makes doing it properly worth the effort. In the United Kingdom, the first £30,000 of a genuine redundancy payment usually comes to you completely tax-free. Stay contractually airtight while mentally checked out, and you put yourself in position for a tax-free exit that can be worth 6 to 12 months of salary, on terms you actually negotiated rather than terms handed to you. I remember a colleague who spent his final year at the company coasting exactly like this, quietly, without drama. But his filing was so tight that when the layoffs finally came, he was the only one on his floor who walked away with an enhanced package. He used it to buy a camper van, and as far as I know, he still has not looked back. That's the actual difference between coasting by accident and coasting on purpose. You do not need a dramatic exit for any of this to work. Let's bring the whole approach together into something you can actually start this week. First, audit your job description against what you're actually doing and find the 30 to 40% of scope creep sitting outside your contract. Second, streamline the repetitive admin part of your role so it stops eating hours it was never worth. Third, keep a simple, honest performance log showing you are meeting every core duty every week. Fourth, deal with the guilt directly, using that one sentence about capacity, instead of letting it talk you out of the whole plan. That's the whole sequence, and none of it requires you to burn any bridges on the way out. None of this is quitting on your working life. It is starting your own retirement a little early, while your employer's pension contributions keep landing in your account and pay for the transition. If this way of thinking about your last working years makes sense to you, subscribe, because we are building out exactly this kind of roadmap for people choosing to retire in place, rather than walk out the door too soon. And if you want to understand how the cash ISARE changes coming in April 2027 affect anyone planning to coast like this, that is exactly what we are covering next. Retirement was never really a date circled on a calendar. It is closer to a state of mind you can start living into tomorrow morning, long before your last official day at work.